Hi, my name is Nathan Parker, pronouns he, him. I am a co-founder of the Internet of Production Alliance. I am a senior cloud architect. I can generally be found in the greater Seattle area with my 3D printers and my cats.
And I am Sarah Hutton, she, her pronouns. I am the Research and Community Engagement Lead for the Internet of Production Alliance, and I'm also a Research Fellow in the School of Public Policy at UMass Amherst. I live in Amherst, Massachusetts, with my partner, 2 kids, and 3 cats. In this video, we're going to talk about how the traditional manufacturing model restricts access to life-changing hardware and the potential that generative AI provides in supporting a very promising way to make prostheses more widely available, open source hardware. We will also discuss the new possibilities generative AI provides as a prosthetic itself for neurodivergent adults. The intent of a prosthetic is to restore the normal functions of something that is missing. Prostheses are typically described in medicine as artificial devices that replace a missing body part lost through disease, trauma, or condition present at birth, and whose absence puts the person missing that particular part at a disadvantage when compared to the majority of the population. Prostheses have come a long way from the bronze plates and leather straps of the capua leg to what is available today. In recent decades, scientists have developed prosthetics that incorporate 3D printed components, motion sensing technologies, and electrodes that connect directly to a user's brain to send signals to the prosthetic limbs for more free movement to navigate the world around them. But freedom for whom? While medical and technological advancements have provided new opportunities and freedom for people with disabilities all over the world, helping anyone resume normal functions to engage, we are witnessing the stark reality that this freedom comes with a high cost. So, if I was looking at a live audience of listeners right now, I'm going to ask the question, how many of your insurance plans cover the LLM quantum? Wait, hold up. How many of us here actually have health insurance coverage? So, sure, the 36 total unique grip options and independent articulating digits of technologically advanced products like the LLM Quantum sound awesome. But out-of-pocket expenses for prosthetic limbs continue to cost anywhere from $6,500 to $80,000 USD for anybody that needs them. And even if you do have health insurance, not all of that cost is covered. So, if you're watching this video, it's not unlikely that you've thought about intellectual property, copyright, and patents. Hey, you might have even watched other presentations or talked to your friends and family or colleagues about this before. It is not unlikely that you have thought about this in terms of the enormous amounts of money at stake and how corporations that maintain market monopolies do so by maintaining a product's IP. This control over IP relates to prosthetics because large corporations that maintain that control over product design can also dictate the high cost of these products, making them entirely unaffordable to those who need them. These manufacturers do have a business to run, after all, and prosthetics are big business. Given that the current market analysis predicts that prostheses manufacturing will increase at a compound annual growth rate of over 4%, read billions of dollars, in the next decade, it is not in the best interest of companies like Aussure and Ottobock to relinquish that control over product designs. The difference between the free market and our current reality is literally a margin of billions of dollars. But what if we could change all of that? We've witnessed and experienced the benefit of openly sharing research, creative works, software, data. That's what brings many of us to this summit every year, and why some of you are watching this video. But what can that look like When we apply the principles, practice, and philosophy of openness to manufacturing, open source hardware takes the design of products, the physical artifacts, firmware, software, and documentation, and makes them publicly available by way of open licensing so that anyone can study, modify, make, and distribute the design or the physical item itself based on that design. So what does this mean for prosthetics and other medical devices? Well, most people hadn't thought much about open source hardware prior to increased use during the COVID-19 pandemic to locally produce and fill gaps in medical supplies. Projects such as Janssen's CT scanner, Fetchco's peristaltic pump, and other DIY or do-it-yourself open hardware devices for tracking blood pressure and monitoring heart rate were created and used many years prior to the pandemic. Having built devices for more than 500 people since it had opened, labs like MIT's Rise Bionics, which creates custom assistive devices for patients in India, is helping to make high-quality prosthetics, even bionics, affordable and accessible to everyone using open source hardware. With these open source hardware designs and knowledge globally available, communities like Enable are activating volunteers from all over the world to use their own 3D printers to make free and low-cost prosthetic upper limb devices for children and adults who need them, leading to projects like the Dominican Republic's first nonprofit prosthetic center. Graviel's journey to start this center was informed by his own experience as an amputee and supported by a growing group of open source developers working in open source hardware around the world. This story is not unique. There are thousands of open source hardware designs and hundreds of organizations, labs, and networks that support distributed production specifically for medical devices and prosthetics. Local makerspaces, labs, and firms are able to produce devices without relying on fragile supply chains, and community members are getting what they need at lower costs. So, why isn't open source hardware the normative? Why are prosthetics still so unaffordable and inaccessible to so many? With the production of any open source hardware product, quality can be a concern. When the open source hardware devices being produced are medical devices, in addition to quality, there are also efficacy and safety concerns. For example, if a disaster or infectious outbreak occurs, protective equipment, bandages, or devices such as respirators, blood sample testing kits, or hospital beds may be needed. But if any of those items, which are produced quickly and locally, are not vetted with any sort of regulatory process and potentially break or cause infection as a result, more harm than good may come of their use. And then, who is responsible for the outcome? The product designer? The person who used it? The facility that applied the product? These are all questions that are in discussion by medical professionals, engineers, and humanitarian agencies around the world. It is an incredibly complex topic, one for which new research, trials, and documentation are being released daily. With thousands of open source hardware designs and the myriad pieces of the distributed production process, it can be difficult to navigate the growing body of knowledge, global networks, and research necessary to make decisions and approach policy change. This is where generative AI could serve to be of a great help in navigating the growing internet of production. There is proof of practice for the use of artificial intelligence and machine learning for scientific research and library users. Generative AI chatbots like UK's Core Connecting Repositories project and Site.ai ingest research questions and generate relevant answers for a price, which include references to specific publications included in their large bodies of work. When considering the development of an open hardware librarian chatbot, these pre-existing models are an interesting proof of practice. While chatbots to answer complex questions are still in their infancy, thinking about the types of data and information to include for pulling relevant responses to questions such as, where can I get my prosthesis repaired? Or, how can I refrigerate this medicine so it won't spoil? Require vast and complex data sets. With healthcare and medical devices, this requires access to clinical trials to ensure the quality and safety of products so they won't end up doing more harm than good. At the Internet of Production Alliance, we are working to provide infrastructure connecting people with the know-how to build a product, where to produce it, and who to engage with that has the expertise to ensure that it is produced, assembled, and used properly. These ongoing questions of quality and lab testing for open source medical devices still remain. And with chatbot products for library research continuing to come into the market space, the cost for accessing scientific publications appears to be getting shifted to accessing the distillation of complex datasets that provide that cognitive prosthetic to allow for navigating what can be an insurmountable amount of information. That feeling of there being an insurmountable amount of information to approach is nothing new, particularly for those of us who struggle with critical path visualization and working memory, essentially engaging in more typical linear thought processes. Tools like generative AI can be a lifesaver for us in our work, and we've been thinking about how it could be developed to not only solve the problems of answering complex questions related to open source hardware, but also how its development could be approached by those of us who stand to benefit from its use more generally, and how we could keep the development of these tools in the hands of community members.
So of particular interest to me are the ways that large language models can be applied as cognitive prosthetics in neurodivergent populations. Taking as an example, in people with ADHD, there are often great struggles with working memory and critical path visualization, both of which seem like strong candidates for cognitive prosthesis. Working memory refers to the active mental workspace that you can use to hold and manipulate information. It is flexible, short-term, task-specific, and has stages of encoding, maintenance, and retrieval, as well as a process of attention regulation to resist interruption by irrelevant information. If you know anyone with ADHD, ask them how well this works for them. You'll get some stories. Similarly, critical path visualization is a process in which a task is visualized in its completed state, and then you work backwards from there to the current state, and then formulate a plan of action, breaking it down into sort of manageable pieces. In neurotypical populations, this is generally performed subconsciously, but it can be a great struggle or even impossible in a lot of people with executive dysfunction, making all kinds of simple or very critical activities nearly impossible. So what does it look like to apply a cognitive prosthetic to these situations? So in working memory, large language models not only have a much larger working memory than humans, this memory can persist, it can be audited, it can be dumped into long-term memory without degradation, none of which is possible even for normal humans. A large language model agent empowered to hold the working memory for a given task on behalf of their user could provide great benefits to those struggling to remember what they're doing and where they are in the process. Similarly, with critical path visualization, some of the more advanced models like Claude or GPT-4 already have sufficient reasoning capabilities to work backwards from a desired end goal and break down sequential tasks into bite-sized pieces, given sufficient context and constraints. Someone suffering from executive dysfunction, unable to imagine how to get from their current state to the desired end state, can find a path forward by leaning on their language model as a prosthetic. Another use case in this area that I find really fascinating, that is not exclusive to neurodivergent people, but certainly includes us, is information overload. As the volume of available information grows exponentially, our ability to manage, absorb, and retain that information becomes increasingly inadequate to the task. What's now becoming possible is for large language models to start doing some of the heavy lifting here. I've been working on building a personal librarian to solve this exact problem for myself, as I'm constantly interested in new things and constantly saving bookmarks that by the time I remember I have them years later, I've forgotten the context and don't know why I've saved this information, and it's no longer of any use to me. But if I can have a conversation with that information, if I can ask it what was happening when it was stored, if I can get it summarized for me without having to watch the 2-hour YouTube video, then the information that I've saved has a lot more value and a lot more utility. Where this all gets really interesting, though, is when you start architecting collaborative multi-agent systems. And an agent in this case is a large language model that has been sort of decoupled from the normal question and answer chatbot format that you're used to in things like ChatGPT, and given a degree of autonomy and persistence. These multi-agent architectures minimize a lot of the hallucination problems that LLMs have and allows for much more complex tasks to be undertaken over longer periods of time, such as, for example, performing original research or designing novel solutions to known problems, or searching through vast archives of information and finding patterns. As I'm aware, there's broadly two approaches to this. There is the team approach, which is similar to the 6 thinking hats methodology, in which each agent is assigned a role, such as critical thinking, fact-checking, creative brainstorming, big picture tracking, etc. And you approach problems by manipulating the composition and sequencing of a team. Another approach, which is a layer approach that's in the Autonomous Cognitive Entity Framework, ACE framework, which was just published this week, in which each agent is assigned a function in a layered system. If you're familiar with the OSI layer model, broadly similar to that. It provides a layered architecture for developing self-directing, self-modifying, and self-stabilizing autonomous machine entities. As this was just published, there's not a lot of practical applications yet, but I strongly believe that this is the direction that all of this work is heading in terms of creating real intelligence. And an AGI will be a layered entity like this. It won't be a single model.
Nathan's right. A single model is not what is going to solve the complex, multi-layered problem of navigating the vast amount of information we are looking at in the creation of a global ecosystem for distributed production. This is where the infusion of more non-linear thinking is useful. We invite you to consider a multi-layered, transdisciplinary, and complex pathway as we continue the conversation of generative AI and how it serves beyond a recommendation and relevancy ranking tool. Generative AI can serve as a helpful tool, and as many of us are very much aware, the constant questioning and discussion of how the parameters are set, how bots are trained and taught to pull back responses to inquiries need to be an ongoing and open dialogue. So whether you're interested in talking more about open source hardware, joining in some of that work, exploring conceptually what we're looking at doing for an open source hardware librarian AI, or interested in discussing further the applications of generative AI as a cognitive prosthesis, we invite you into the dialogue and to get in touch.
I hope this has been useful, interesting, or at least informative, and please don't hesitate to get in touch with either of us about any of this, or if you'd like to collaborate on something in the future. Thank you.